Hi, my name is Abhijay Tambe, and today I will be talking about how general US presence influences the way that Saudi Arabia and Israel act in times of tension. I'll be doing a critical analysis and a comparison of the two states' subsequent actions and the resulting impacts socially and economically. Starting with some historical context, the history of US relations with each of these countries is defining to current policies, so it's important to analyze critical junctures in relations to fully evaluate the present. With regards to Saudi Arabia, US relations are generally more strained than they are with Israel, and there's two main reasons for this. The first is the impact of oil crises and the oil market. Four main oil crises have defined the way that Saudi Arabia acts: 1973, 79, 2008, and 2012 to 2015. In all of these crises, Saudi Arabia took steps to save its own market first, prioritizing its well-being and often neglecting its alliances with countries like the US. The second reason for strained relations between Saudi Arabia and the US is the 2003 US invasion of Iraq, in which Shia Muslims gained influence in Iraq after the power vacuum left due to the death of Saddam Hussein. Due to Saudi Arabia's Sunni Muslim affiliation, they felt threatened by the heightened influence of Shias in Iraq, making them resent the US more for their invasion. Conversely, the relationship between the US and Israel is much stronger. Two major events define the strength of this relationship, and the first is the 1973 Yom Kippur War. In the Yom Kippur War, the US wanted to avoid being perceived as a regional aggressor, so they had Israel refrain from launching a preemptive strike. That allowed the US to act as an honest broker in the conflict, which improved its credibility greatly. And second, in the 1991 Gulf War, Iraq launched airstrikes on Israel, to which Israel felt a need to respond. However, at the request of the US, Israel reluctantly stepped down, allowing the US to maintain its credibility. First, I will look at the US influence on Saudi Arabia in recent years. The largest area in which the US and Saudi Arabia currently disagree upon is the handling of Iran in the context of Saudi-Iran relations. Historically, prior to the Shia takeover in Iraq, Saudi Arabia and Iran were working together in counterterrorism efforts. However, after that, they began an adversarial relationship. Since then, in order to win over Saudi Arabian allegiance, the US has consistently presented Iran as a regional security threat, which alienates the two countries and exacerbates the rivalry over pre-existing differences, such as their opposing interpretations of Islam, with Saudi Arabia having Sunni Islam and Iran having Shia Islam. Next, Saudi Arabia has also pressured the US into taking aggressive action against Iran, with the King of Saudi Arabia's call to cut off the head of the snake. Rather than pursue aggressive action, however, the US instead pursued the Iran nuclear deal, which opened an easing of tensions with diplomatic talks. However, Saudi Arabia publicly opposed to this, and instead, they supported President Trump's more aggressive approach of pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal and imposing harsh economic sanctions. Next, direct US-Saudi relations also reflect their more strained dynamic. The US supports the Saudi monarchy with diplomatic backing and military support in return for Saudi Arabia's efforts in counterterrorism. However, the US and Saudi Arabia differ on issues such as human rights concerns and divergent approaches to issues like Iran, which strains relations. Additionally, trade between the US and Saudi Arabia is heavily centered around oil, with both countries competing to gain more of a stake in the global market. This agreement is not a free trade agreement, which is indicative of weaker relations between the two countries as tariffs run wild within their trade relations. Additionally, aforementioned oil crises have driven a stake in this trade as well, with the US increasing its own shale oil production independent of Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia finding other buyers such as China and India, with both countries rapidly decoupling from each other. In contrast to US influence on Saudi Arabia, the US and Israel have a more two-sided relationship, with each country having a significant impact on the other's actions. With regards to political backing, the United States is a consistent supporter of Israel on both the domestic and international stage. It has used its position as a permanent member on the UN Security Council to veto resolutions even slightly critical of Israel. For example, it has vetoed ceasefire calls 3 times since the conflict started on October 7th, blocking demands for aid by other council members. Overall, it has supported Israel by vetoing resolutions 44 times, and furthermore, Israel's influence on American politics is evident through lobbying groups, which not only influence the US's behavior in the Security Council, but domestically as well, with several bills passed to send more aid to Israel. Furthermore, trade relations between the two countries are also incredibly strong. The US and Israel have a long-standing free trade agreement, which signifies a much stronger relationship than the US and Saudi Arabia. Israel is a leading recipient of U.S. foreign aid, and in return, is a frequent purchaser of U.S. weapon systems, with U.S. arms making up 60% of Israel's total arms imports. This constant military aid is founded on the US's dedication to grant Israel a definitive military advantage over every other country in the region, which is why they send them so many arms. Next, I'll talk about the socio-economic impacts of Israel and Saudi Arabia's actions in relation to US presence. For Saudi Arabia, the impacts have largely been in the context of regional conflicts, such as in Yemen and Syria. In Yemen, the US has supported Saudi Arabia with arms sales and strategic backing. And Saudi Arabia in turn supported the Yemeni government to fight against the Iranian-backed Houthi rebel group. This war has led to an ongoing humanitarian crisis, with 377,000 people dead both directly and indirectly from causes like starvation. Similarly, in Syria, US involvement has had complex implications, with the US involvement being much more direct in this case. The US has provided arms to core factions such as Saudi Arabia and has contributed to the protraction of the conflict, with nearly 307,000 civilians being killed in the armed conflict from 2011 to 2022. With regards to Israel, the United States' consistent and prominent backing of Israel has led to it aggressing in Palestine, particularly in the Gaza Strip. And if no massive change in humanitarian aid flows occurs, up to 186,000 people are estimated to die in the region. The US has played a large role in this conflict, with constant vetoing of resolutions for ceasefire prolonging the conflict and arms sales propping up the Israeli military. Furthermore, from an economic standpoint, the Iron Dome missile defense system in Israel has been critical for reducing infrastructure damage from missile attacks, and the US contributed significantly to funding it, supporting Israel from both a social and economic standpoint. So, some final thoughts and future direction. For the US and Saudi Arabia, their dependence on each other and the dynamism of their relationship means that the future of the alliance is subject to change, massive change indeed. Saudi Arabia has begun to find other buyers for its oil, and the US has begun building up its own oil production capacity, with shale oil production rapidly increasing in recent years. This has showcased a slow decoupling. In the future, this alliance could slowly deteriorate, following a trend in recent years. However, regarding Israel, their relationship will likely remain strong, with lobbying groups and strong trade relations indicating that the two countries hold massive influence over each other and will likely not reduce support. However, this may have implications beyond these two countries, as continued US support of these two countries has and can strain relations with other countries, especially in the Middle East. For example, the US vetoing resolutions in the UN Security Council to support Israel has rapidly increased anti-American sentiment among other Arabian states that support Palestine. Overall, this may build anti-American sentiment, fostering perceptions of bias in the US's foreign policy. Thank you.